The distress beacon had been Julia's last desperate act. As the Calarian Council's chief diplomat, she had watched her civilization crumble under the relentless assault of the Void Swarm for 3 long months. Their once proud cities were now ash, their defensive fleets scattered like leaves in a storm. The Calarians, a peaceful species who had spent millennia cultivating art and philosophy, had no warriors left to stand against the darkness. When Julia encoded the message to Earth, she had expected sympathy, perhaps some humanitarian supplies, maybe even a small contingent of peacekeepers. The humans were known across the galaxy as recent arrivals to the interstellar community, curious, and seemingly friendly. They had no reputation as warriors. They had no grand military tradition that echoed through the stars. Julia had asked for refuge, a place for her people to flee, to survive. To rebuild what arrived was something entirely different. Commander Oscar Reeves stood on the bridge of the UNSC and, watching the tactical display with cold, calculating eyes. Behind his ship, a fleet of 47 human vessels emerged from quantum space, their hulls bearing the scars of conflicts the Calarians had never heard of. Destroyers, carriers, engineering vessels, and the massive dreadnought Resolute formed a battle formation that would have made the ancient Calarian admirals weep with envy. "Commander," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting massive swarm activity in sectors 7 through 12. Estimated force, 3,000 bioships. The Calarian homeworld is nearly surrounded." Oscar's jaw tightened. He had read Julia's message 17 times during the 2-week journey. The desperation in every word, the quiet acceptance of extinction. It reminded him too much of colonies he'd failed to reach in time during the Centauri rebellion. "Not this time." "Signal the fleet," Oscar commanded. "We're not here to evacuate. We're here to win." On the surface of Calaria Prime, Julia stood among the ruins of what had once been the Grand Assembly Hall. Refugees huddled in makeshift shelters, their luminescent skin dim with exhaustion and fear. She had just received word that the human ships had arrived, and her heart sank with shame and gratitude. They would help her people escape, at least. Some would survive. Then the sky began to burn. Human fighters screamed through the atmosphere in formations, so tight they seemed like single organisms. Railgun fire lit up the darkness as the UNSC fleet engaged the swarm bioships with a ferocity that defied comprehension. The Void Swarm, creatures that had consumed 17 civilizations, met humanity's fury armed for the first time in recorded history. They retreated, but the humans weren't done. Within 6 hours, Oscar had established a command center in Julia's ruined city. Engineers, hundreds of them, poured from landing craft with equipment Julia couldn't even identify. They worked with mechanical precision, erecting defensive barriers, setting up shield generators, and deploying automated turrets that tracked and eliminated swarm scouts with ruthless efficiency. "You asked for refuge," Oscar said when he finally met Julia face to face in the command center. His armor was scorched, his face weathered by combat, but his eyes held an intensity that made Julia's translator unit struggle to capture the emotion. "But we don't abandon people who need help. We don't let monsters win. Commander, we cannot fight," Julia protested, her forearms gesturing helplessly. "We are not warriors. We have no weapons, no training." "Then we'll teach you," Oscar interrupted. "And while you learn, we'll hold the line." Over the next month, the impossible happened. Human engineers rebuilt Calarian infrastructure faster than the swarm could destroy it. Combat instructors trained Calarian volunteers not to die gloriously, but to survive and fight smart. Human medics worked alongside Calarian healers, sharing knowledge that saved thousands. But it was the battles that truly shocked Julia. The humans fought with a coordination born from countless wars, using tactics that turned the swarm's overwhelming numbers into a disadvantage. They deployed weapons that seemed designed specifically to counter biological horrors: incendiary rounds, viral agents, quantum disruptors that shredded organic matter at the molecular level. "How do you know how to fight them?" Julia asked Oscar one night as they reviewed battle reports. "The swarm has destroyed civilizations that had millions of years of advancement beyond your species." Oscar was quiet for a long moment, staring at the tactical display. "Because we've fought monsters before, Ambassador. Maybe not from space, but we know what it means to face extinction. We know what it takes to survive when everything wants you dead. And we learned a long time ago that the only way to guarantee refuge is to make sure there's something left to take refuge in." 3 months after their arrival, the human fleet achieved what every other species had deemed impossible. The Void Swarm, battered and broken, withdrew from Calarian space entirely. The combined human-Calarian defense network held strong. and reconstruction began in earnest. Julia stood beside Oscar on the observation deck of the Indomitable, watching the sunset over her scarred but surviving homeworld. Human and Calarian workers moved together below, rebuilding what had been lost. "We asked for refuge," Julia said softly. "And you brought us war." "No," Oscar corrected, his voice gentle but firm. "You asked for refuge, and we made sure you'd have a home to take refuge in. There's a difference. Humans learned long ago that hope isn't something you run to, it's something you fight for." Julia's luminescent skin brightened slightly, the Calarian equivalent of a smile. "The galaxy will hear of this. They will know what humanity did for us." Oscar nodded, but his expression remained serious. "Then they'll also know that when you ask humanity for help, we don't just send thoughts and prayers. We send commanders who know how to win, engineers who can rebuild anything, and warships to make sure there's something left worth saving." As the Indomitable prepared for departure, leaving behind a permanent human garrison and a rebuilt Calarian defense force, Julia understood the truth. Humanity hadn't just saved her people. They had taught them something more valuable than refuge. They had taught them that survival was a choice, not a gift, and that sometimes the greatest act of compassion was bringing overwhelming force to ensure that those who needed help would live to see another dawn. The galaxy had asked humans for refuge. The humans had answered with something better. They had answered with victory.